All right, welcome to Pop the Trunk Sports' first basketball podcast called Pass and Screen Away. Introduce our four members. We have Rocky Rhodes.
What's up?
Tyler Kawahara.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
And Big Rory Patterson.
Ready to go, guys. Ready to go.
All right, let's jump right in this and get into the topics. We're about a week away from the season getting started. Preseason games are popping off. Is there anything that you guys have seen throughout the preseason that's jumped your eye right away?
I guess I'll dive in right away. I've seen a lot of young players that I think are going to on the come up. A lot of old names falling off, especially fantasy relevance. And I see a lot of young players with no names, being early fantasy factors, at least in the preseason. But we'll see.
Yeah, I kind of see a similar situation to what we had last year with a lot of bad teams that have a lot of young players that are going to get a lot of time again. There's been talk about kind of redoing the lottery, but I don't think it's going to affect the way teams rebuild this year.
That's a good point. What do you think, TK?
I haven't seen anything myself that's been outside the ordinary. I've only just really been watching it strictly to see if you can get an idea of what kind of offense some of these teams are going to run. But like in terms of trying to figure out the rotation of these teams, it's still all in flux. So I just been kind of looking for those type of things myself. But I haven't noticed like a player that's kind of stood out to me personally.
And then on the NBA, thinking about how they're going to do the lottery, what kind of things have they talked about doing that you've heard? I know they talked about kind of locking in the top four teams that really, really suck, and then those are kind of just the teams that can get the lottery pick. Is that kind of what you guys have heard as well?
I've heard
go ahead, Rock.
A bunch of different sorry to cut you off. Just a bunch of different things. I haven't heard any sort of final verdict, but it sounds like the owners are going to vote fairly soon on it, and it sounds like pretty much everybody besides the 76ers are on board with coming up with some sort of new system.
Mm-hmm. They pretty much changed the rule because of the 76ers, which is pretty amazing.
Right. And the Sixers have taken the stance and said that you can change the rule and it's not going to change the way we tank for the next couple of years. So
they got that on wraps. They're tanking for sure. Their over and under this year for total wins of the season is 16. Is there a chance they go over?
Yeah, there's a chance. There's a huge chance of that. 16 games. You can pretty much fall on your ass and win 16 games. But I wouldn't be surprised if they are under it, though. I think they might be one of the worst teams in NBA history, if not the worst. They're worse than last year. Last year they had Spencer Hawes, Thaddeus Young. They had legitimate veterans with the rookie of the year, Michael Carter-Williams. So I'm surprised that, not surprised, I guess, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're even worse than last year and under 16.
I got the under.
Yeah, I like the under on that one, too. Philly, their starting lineup to start the year out, it's going to be pretty dicey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't see there's any way that they win more than 16 games. They're going to be that bad. And I don't know what you guys are thinking, but I don't know when Michael Carter-Williams is ever going to even get on the court. I know they don't even know when he's going to even return. And clearly without him, then they really have no shot at 16 games.
And are they going to rush him back? That's the big thing where they're tanking. Are they even going to bring him back early?
Yeah, I know he went pretty early in fantasy drafts because that news wasn't out, and I kind of feel bad for a lot of those owners who were expecting big things from him this year, because I wouldn't be surprised if they, sit him pretty much all year in and out of the lineup, especially if he's not right.
And I actually decided to do an early ESPN, one of those leagues they have. I coughed up the $30 like an idiot, and I took Carter Williams and Bradley Beal, and I'm looking really bad right now.
Oh, man. Yeah, Beal went down with, 6 to 8 week, wrist injury?
Yep.
Yeah. So he seems very injury prone. He has a propensity to get really hurt.
That's what I'm thinking. At this point, he's kind of got that label that he's injury prone, and you really have to take a risk if you're going to draft him at this point, I think.
So if you were in a keeper league and you're taking over a team and you're in a really, really bad spot like in our league, and you don't have a lot of young players on there, is he a guy you would still take a flyer on? Because he's still a young player. Do you see him ever shaking that rap, or is that just kind of who he's going to be?
I don't know. To me, it just gives me flashbacks of Eric Gordon. Everybody's really high on him for a lot of years. The potential was always there, but the injuries just kind of derailed that. And so I hope that he gets past this injury bug. But if you're thinking about keeping him, you definitely have to think about that. So,
yeah, that's the exact name that kind of came to my mind too, was Eric Gordon. The second you asked that question. Because, yeah, they seem to have the same trajectory in terms of the injury history that they both have. So would you take him? I don't know. I guess it really just depends what else is even out there. It's definitely a gamble.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great comparison. I would say, Eric Gordon is probably also a great shooter, but probably not as good of a shooter, but probably a better slasher and playmaker than Bradley Beal was early in his career. I mean, don't forget, Eric Gordon was putting up 25 and 5 on the Clippers when they were really bad when he was younger. So those are pretty impressive numbers. Beal hasn't reached those numbers yet, but he's so smooth, and I'm hoping that his game, he's not a really play super hard kind of guy or dive on the floor kind of guy. So hopefully, as he gets older, gets stronger, he can stay healthy, because that sucks when guys that talented just can't stay on the floor.
So where we're on Eric Gordon here too, is he a guy at 95 where he's at in ESPN rankings? Is he a guy you even think about taking a flyer on, even though we're sitting here talking about his injury risk also?
I don't touch him.
Yeah, not with the 10-foot pole, man. No,
I don't think so either. And a lot of it has to do with his role on the team. I personally don't even know what he is going to be right now. If he's their fourth option, their third option, their fifth option. And to me, it seems like he's really just going to be a spot-up shooter. So,
So beyond the unibrow, is there anyone else on that team you see carving in a huge fantasy niche?
I think it just kind of depends on how the season plays out. Like TK pretty much hit that right on the head. Is last year at the end of the season that they had nobody left with injuries, and they still didn't give Eric Gordon the ball.
Right.
And so, to me, I think he's totally out of play. Outside of Brow, I don't know. Tyreek obviously can put up big numbers, but he has a way of agitating every coach he plays for, so it's hard to kind of gauge what kind of playing time he may get.
Yeah, he's one of the, stat-based, he's one of the worst shooters from the two-guard spot. Or he sometimes even plays the 1 or the 3. He's kind of a dynamic guy in that way, but he's one of the worst outside shooters in the NBA. And so until he cleans that up, I kind of agree with you. I still think Ryan Anderson, though, is a factor. I still think he's going to find his way to get on the floor, especially with Ashik getting in foul trouble. He's such a great three-point shooter, and plus he can rebound, too. So I still see him carving out 28 minutes a night and 2.5 threes a night, probably 15 and 7, somewhere in there.
I like that. I've read a lot of stuff, too, that he's willing to play the 3 to get on the court, so that definitely bodes well for him as well.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, T?
It's just hard just from where you got to draft any of them. I would say if I was forced to pick one, I'd probably take Tyreek Evans, but
yeah,
I'm not loving it. Maybe Ashik, if I was desperate for a big at the end of the draft, I would maybe take a flyer on him just to basically buy a lottery ticket. But outside of that, I wouldn't mind the Ryan Anderson one like you guys brought up either, but it just seems like for where you got to take these guys, there's just better value on the board.
Well, and right now they have him, and ESPN's got him at 78.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of good value still left there past 78.
Yeah. And don't forget about Drew Holiday either. Apparently he's been working on his three-point shot. When he was in Philadelphia, he was a above average three-point shooter. He kind of regressed last year, but I think he was hurt. But if he can stay on the floor as well, I like him. Not as a top flight point guard, but maybe in that second or third tier point guard. I think it could be solid.
I think the Pelicans, they're just a good team. Are the Pelicans or Hornets now? I don't even know.
Pelicans.
Okay.
Charlotte Hornets now. We got the Charlotte Hornets now.
I knew there was a switch there. They're kind of the team that, from a fantasy-based perspective, you want to shy away from, just because they've collected a lot of guys who have been the man on bad teams before. And so, I think the perception on Tyreek, Drew Holiday, and even Ryan Anderson from his days with Orlando is that they're going to put up big numbers. But, put all those guys on one team, and there's just not enough minutes and touches for everybody to produce.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that.
Is there any chance the Pelicans sneak their way into the playoffs with a healthy Brow all year long, which hasn't happened yet?
Man, that's tough. They definitely have the talent. It's going to come down to those guards staying healthy, really, is really what that's going to ride on. Mm-hmm. Really any of the 5 of them are between Brow, Anderson, Holiday, Gordon, and Tyreek. They're all really have shown to be injury prone so far. So that's really what's going to come down to. I think that they could get there. It's just going to boil down to, can they stay healthy?
I'm a huge Anthony Davis fan. I think he's a freak. But even in the preseason, I think he's had 2 different injuries where he broke his finger. And then just the other day he sprained something. I forget. Something flashed across my phone on the team stream. But he just seems like he just gets banged up. I think he needs to add a little weight. Kind of a comparison to like early KG when he was so skinny. When he added a little bit of weight, I think it made his career last a little bit longer.
So what do you guys think with Ashik? Do you think that that's going to help his fantasy value, or even just the ability to stay healthy where they have a legit center now that can defend? You think that's going to take any pressure off of him?
Yeah.
I do, and he's kind of a perimeter jump shooter too, so kind of really fits offensively a little bit, even though Ashik really brings nothing besides dunking and rebounding. Right. And even he's not a great dunker, but
right.
That's really all he's able to do. Not a good shot blocker, but he does keep Anthony Davis away from guarding the centers. And then, he can play pick and pop with anybody. He's an amazing offensive player. And shoot, you can make an argument for him if you have the one pick. Anthony Davis, and makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah.
With KD out this year, that's definitely an option.
I mean, you're rolling the dice on the injury, but the upside is there for that.
But if you're looking at ESPN rankings, your second, third, and fourth guy are Anthony Davis, Steph Curry, and Chris Paul, and I think all three of those guys have propensity for injuries, and so I mean, you're really rolling the dice any way you go, and so. I think you probably got to go with AD just because he can probably get you 2 to 3 blocks a game, a steal and a half, and give you probably this year 22 and 11 with high percentages from the FG and the FT. So I think.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to agree with your comment on the percentages. I think he carries a lot of hidden value in those areas that people often overlook.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's kind of one of those things. If you do have Anthony Davis. We've kind of set up a league, and the guy's got a lot of great big guys around Anthony Davis, but he's kind of going to miss out on what he does, which is his percentages. He doesn't hurt you at all. And then if you draft these big guys, and they rebound, they may block shots, but, you're really losing out on some of Anthony Davis's value with his free throw percentage there, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So where do you guys let's jump onto point guards really quick here. I know obviously Steph Curry is the first one off the board. Who do you guys like in the second and third? Because I've seen a lot of guys take Westbrook or Wall over Chris Paul. What do you guys think about that?
I think that one thing we have to clarify when we're talking about all this is it just depends on what kind of league you're in. A roto league versus a head-to-head league is so different, and I think Chris Paul is like the king of the roto leagues in the fact that he's just great in not great, but solid in almost every category, great in a few, and he doesn't hurt you anywhere. Whereas you start looking at Westbrook and some of the things, the field goal percentage or the lack of threes in some years.
Turnovers.
May hurt you. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think based on the league, obviously some of the leagues we run are head-to-head, and I value Steph and Westbrook and all those guys over Chris Paul at this point, but we'll see.
And, I had the chance to have Chris Paul, and he's great. He gives you dimes and steals, doesn't hurt you, and you have a chance to win turnovers, which is great. But if you need points and you got dimes and steals wrapped up, I mean, he's not going to help out a lot in the point category. You just can't count on the X amount of points for Chris.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
this year, too, it seems like he's... Oh, go ahead.
One thing, not to forget, too, is, especially in a head-to-head league, is the games played. And you look at, a Westbrook before last year, he hadn't missed a game. You look at John Wall, he played all 82 last year. And you look at Chris Paul, the last 3 years, he hasn't played over, I think, 67 games. And so, I think I weigh that heavily. I think a lot of people don't. But, especially when you get into the playoffs, you've got to have your studs healthy. And if you don't, you're not going to get out of that first or second round. So I think, one thing to keep in mind, too, is, what team are you on? Like, one of my worries with, say, Kobe Bryant this year is, he might stay healthy, but toward the end of the year, if they're so bad, it's like, why not sit Kobe and wait till next year, And so a lot of these guys, too, on bad teams, they may be healthy, but, especially toward the end of the year, they're going to make up injuries. Oh, my elbow hurts. Oh, I'm sick. I have a migraine, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I know you guys brought up those three players. I feel James Harden's the third best player on the board, and so I actually would go him over any of them just because to me, with Lin gone, I feel he's going to pretty much play like a point guard. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm going to get enough dimes to kind of compensate the few I'd lose there just from his threes and his free throw line. He even, is going to chip in some steals. So I feel I would definitely take him over those three myself. And just for those, reasons that I feel I'm not going to really lose anything from it.
Right.
Yeah, post All-Star break last year, I think he was the number 1 or 2 fantasy player overall, which, you look at him, he's a top 2 FT guy. He gets almost 2 steals a game, almost 2 threes a game, one of the league leaders in scoring. And like you said, TK, he dimes like a point guard. He almost, averaged 6 dimes a game. So you can't go wrong with James. And he's pretty much stayed healthy his whole career, too. So I like that a lot about him.
The fact you can get all those dimes out of the shooting guard spot, too, it's really valuable. When you start trying to build a balanced team, that's some of the value Steph carries, too, that puts him above everybody for my take is, you get 6 dimes out of your shooting guard's spot. You don't have to have another point guard on your team that totally carries the load like CP3 may. Another point guard that gets 5 to 6 dimes that you can find later in the draft becomes really valuable then.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what do you think, CH, where we're going next?
Who plays more games this season, Derrick Rose or Kobe Bryant?
Ooh.
And do you take a flyer on both those guys?
Well, you guys know I took a flyer on him in the second round. So
You're Kobe!
I was just yelling Kobe because, I'm a huge, believer in Kobe. Until I see him fall off, I just won't believe it. And that's just me with Kobe. But the reason I reached for him in the second round is because I look at those, I had the 7th pick, and so I think I had, the 14th or 15th pick. And after those top 10, I just wasn't really huge on anybody. I liked Bosch, I liked Lillard, but you had already took Lillard. Love was off the board. I really had a tough decision between Al, Jeff, and Kobe is who I was really looking at. But the reason I went with Kobe is because he's on such a bad team. They're terrible. He's going to have to put up 23, 24 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, a couple threes, a steal. His FG, I think, is really going to drop this year because he's going to have to shoot a lot of mid-range Js, a lot of threes because he just can't get to the basket like he used to. But I see him projecting, a top 5 FT guy as well. And so that's kind of why I reach for Kobe. But to your question, guys, I think I would go with Kobe just because I just don't trust Rose. I just don't know what to expect from him.
He's looked great so far, and Derrick Rose has had these huge major injuries, and you're running a lot of risk taking them. But, when he's right, he just scores so much from the point guard spot. But one thing you're not really seeing, and I know it's just preseason, is, the steals, and he's starting to hit a few jumpers, but he's eventually going to have to start getting a little more consistent with his mid-range. Because in his day, he would hit his mid-range really consistently and just kind of open up for everything. But he's got a better team this year with, Pau Gasol, Noah, Gibson still off the bench. So hopefully that just takes a little pressure off of him to, maybe not carry as many minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I think the two things for me with that situation is I go Kobe every time just because Kobe's shown the ability to play through injuries, and obviously D Rose had some major injuries, but he's always been pretty reluctant to get back, and he knows his body better than anybody. But from a fantasy standpoint, I'm always going to lean Kobe on that. And then the other thing is I don't know that Coach Thibodeau has enough common sense not to play the dude 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
He's ran everybody's head into the ground.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
And hopefully he's smarter about that than I think he's going to be. But if D Rose gets into a nice little groove, he may be seeing 36 minutes a game, and I just don't like that situation for him in the long run by the time the season's over.
TK, what do you think, man?
That's a pretty tough one. I literally would probably flip a coin, but I think I would go Derrick Rose just simply because I know Thibodeau runs his players in the ground, but I feel with Kirk Heinrich, I just have a feeling that they're going to scale his minutes back and do it right this year. But I really think both are going to be fine in terms of games. I really do. I think they're both going to be around 70 to 75, and it's just going to be simply because they're just not going to play quite the volume that they're normally accustomed to playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. So, aside from the injury, who would you take first in the fantasy draft?
Kobe.
Yeah.
I think I would take Rose just because I view the playoffs as obviously being what you pretty much are playing for, and I mean that in terms of your fantasy playoffs. And so because I feel the Lakers will be well out of it by then, I'm a little worried that that Scott will really scale his minutes back enough to where I'm just going to try and gamble on Rose in that spot.
And
but it's really close.
And they could just get blown out of a lot of games, too. I mean, this is a Laker team that looks pretty bad. And, they're down 20, and they've been down 20 for the last month of the season. You just may see his minutes drop a little bit. I agree with that.
The one thing not to forget, too, though, is I know Kobe is a fiery competitor, but aside from that, he's going for records. He's about to pass MJ here pretty soon, and then he's going to try and catch Karl for the all-time points scored. And I think, there's always going to be that point of contention between him and Byron, especially them being ex-teammates. So they kind of look at each other as peers almost. He's going to look at Kobe as a coach on the floor. So I think Kobe's going to have as much say in that as Byron Scott will. Do I think his minutes will probably drop a little bit toward the end of the season? Yeah. But not enough to really, truly, I think, affect it too much. I think, like TK said, though, they will be so far out of it. That's my one concern is, like, okay, he gets banged up just a little bit, and they're like, okay, you're going to sit for 7 to 10 games. I think that's the major concern for me.
All right, let's get into a new segment here, and we're going to call it 7 seconds or less. I'm going to pick 10 teams, and thanks to Bovada, they set up a win total for the regular season, and I'm just going to name off some teams, and we'll start with Rocky, and we'll go through, and all you have to do is over or under, and I'm going to just say the win total what Bovada has set up.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, to start it out, Utah, 26 wins.
Over.
TK, you go ahead and go second. I'll go third every time.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely take the over on that one, too.
I'm absolutely taking the over. I see a lot of young guys who are going to step into decent roles this year. I see Alec Burks as a 20-point scorer, 18-point scorer. Apparently, Kanter's shooting threes now. And when he started last year, he was a 14-8 guy. I know they haven't had much success with Favors playing them together, but they've got a decent rotation. They re-signed Gordon Hayward. I like them for 30 games, probably 29 games.
Yeah, I like the over too, just because Tyrone Corbin's not there anymore, and he was just awful. And I mean, if they didn't even have a coach, they would have a better chance than having Tyrone Corbin on the bench.
Yeah, Corbin might have been one of the worst coaches in the last 10 years.
I'm going to say he was the worst coach I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Alvin Gentry has a pretty strong claim to that for me, too.
That is true.
Hey, he took that team
He's
to
getting
the
paid,
Western Conference
though,
Finals.
right now.
Yeah.
He's one of the highest paid assistant coaches. I think he's on Golden State.
Yeah, he's with Steve Kerr. What's your guys' deal with Alvin Gentry?
If you can't find a rotation anywhere you go, then, I mean...
Well, and one thing that always bothered me...
Larry Drew, same thing with Milwaukee last year. I mean, if you can't find a rotation, that's just like numero uno on the list of things you need to do as a coach. And if you can't do that, you're just never going to have success, I don't think.
You're just butthurt because you had John Henson and he couldn't get on the floor.
No, I actually picked Henson up off the waivers because other dudes like Larry Sanders was in the doghouse. But, yeah, I mean, if you have 12, 13 starters in the NBA that you are, like, rotating as starters, you are garbage as a team.
Yeah, Ilyasova never really, recaptured that magic he had from a couple seasons ago. Like, no one just overperformed. You're right. That's a pretty good sign of a bad coach if none of your players are overperforming.
And let's get right into the next one. Portland Trailblazers, 49.5.
Is that me?
Yeah. Rocky.
Under.
I'm going to take the over.
I'm going to take 49. Would that be the over if you take 49?
That is the under, 49.5.
Okay. I'm going to take 49 because that's a tough. I mean, Western Conference is murderous. I still like them as probably the 5th seed, but I'm going to take the under.
I'm going to go over. They still have their nucleus. They've added some depth. C.J. McCollum, hopefully can give him a little minute. Steve Blake, Chris Kaman. I know those aren't huge, exciting names, and they're not going to play a ton of minutes, but they will play a factor. They've always had a history of getting hurt, but, they've stayed healthy all last year, and if they can continue to do that and build off, their 2 stars, I like the over there.
How many games did they win last year?
They won 54.
Ooh, wow. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, they came out of the gate strong, though, and got to 54. And so, I don't know. They had a great season last year, and it's just like Rory said, it's the Western Conference, and that's a lot of wins for a team they have a lot of great players, but they don't have that top dog that some of these other teams have.
Yeah. I mean, Aldridge, Lillard, they're a couple studs, but gosh, and that's the thing. Last year, I think they had the healthiest team as far as their starting lineup, in second place behind the Raptors. And so, if anyone goes down, Wesley Matthews has been injured before. Robin Lopez has been injured before. Batum has been injured before. And so, I just don't know if they can replicate that healthiness this year. We'll just have to see.
I guess I'm kind of banking more on the fact that, they're going to play Oklahoma City a couple times in that first 2 months, and obviously without Durant, that's going to help their cause to at least win one of those games. So I guess I know that the West is tough, but I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like where the bulk of their schedule is at the beginning, I feel that they're going to probably get off to a similar start that they did last year. Mm-hmm. And I just think learning from what they did last year in terms of obviously he ran his starters into the ground too. So
Right.
So I guess maybe with CH brought up with Kaman coming in, Steve Blake coming in, CJ McCollum maybe taking on a bigger role. Maybe they'll scale their minutes back at least a little bit to help weather the bulk of the schedule. It looks like they're going to get there at the middle to the back end part of their schedule.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's jump into the next one here. We're going to go with LeBron and the Cleveland Cavaliers at 58.5.
I'm going to go over just because they're in the East, but I just have it's going to take a lot of sacrifice from Love and Kyrie just to make it work. I'll go over, but I'm not confident in saying that at all.
I'm going to take the over for pretty much the same reason, just given that they're in the Eastern Conference. I think if they're in the West, obviously for sure I would never take the over there, but I think that they're going to be able to beat up on the back-end teams in the East, and that's going to help their cause.
The one thing I think they have going for them is when LeBron teamed up with Bosh and Wade. I think LeBron was in that stage of his career where he had to prove himself, and he had to kind of become the top dog. Wade probably had to become the second dog. So there was a lot of chemistry issues there to start. At this point in LeBron's career, I think he's fine, just leading the team now, leading the team in dimes some nights, scoring 20 points a game when he has to is all. And so I think the chemistry might be a little bit better to start with this group.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to go against the grain here and go under because just probably one main reason. I think the Eastern Conference has improved. I think the Atlanta Hawks are a little healthier. The Milwaukee Bucks might surprise some people. The Detroit Pistons under Stan Van Gundy, I think, can be a better team, especially when he gets that rotation figured out and gets rid of Josh, the worst three-point shooter in history, Smith. And I just think they're a little better. I think the Washington Wizards, they added Paul Pierce. Even though they lost Ariza, I think Paul Pierce is that locker room leader who can really show people how to win games. And I think the Hornets, they added Lance Stevenson, and everyone's a year more of a veteran there. I think the East is a little bit better. And so I'm going to take maybe 57, 56 games. And just because I think the Cavs, too, they have kind of those backcourt issues with Deion Waiters, a couple other guys who I think might not figure out their role right away. And so I think they'll probably find their groove in the 30th game probably. But, as the season starts, I think they have some kinks to work out, especially on defense.
I'm going to go on the over. I think you watch them play, and it's just preseason. You see him moving the ball really well, led by LeBron. Like you said, Rocky, he doesn't really have anything to prove. He's kind of just whatever the team needs. The Spurs have beat him throughout his career when they've needed to, and they do it by just moving the basketball. And the Cavs have that lineup where, hey, Waiters can lead the team in scoring some nights. They got that kind of team. And I think the East has gotten better, but, Indiana, they're going to be bad.
Yeah, they are.
So those are easy wins. Philly, there's still some really bad teams. And even the teams that have gotten better, Cleveland's still better than. So I like the over there, but I mean last year Miami won 54, so it's going to be close, I think, but I like the over on that one.
If Varejao managed to stay healthy, which I highly, highly doubt given his history, it's a wrap on the 58. I think that's a pretty easy number if he can stay healthy. I just think he's kind of the glue guy that maybe the Heat never even had, but like I said, his health is always a risky factor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's get into the next one. We got the team that made the big trade for Kevin Love, the Timberwolves, or for Andrew Wiggins with Kevin Love, at 27.
Ooh, that's quite a few for a team that just gave up everything. Wiggins, I don't think is going to win them any games right now. They're definitely the reason I have the league pass this year. They're going to be really exciting to watch with Rubio and Wiggins, but they're not hitting 27, I don't think, in the Western Conference.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'll probably barely take the under two. My whole thing with them is I don't know what the backcourt rotation is even going to be there outside of Ricky Rubio. And I feel like that's kind of the problem I have with them is I don't know what their rotation is, so it's kind of hard to really gauge that question without knowing that. But given the cast of characters that they have, I'm just going to go ahead and say the under, but it's going to be close.
I'm going to go under two, guys. I think this is blatantly obviously. I mean, like, if you look at this team, there's just a bunch of wings on this team. Like, they've got, an up-and-coming young second-year player in Georgie Dang. And of course, they got the big Pekovic down low, but Pekovic has shown that he can't stay healthy. And then there's just no vets on this team. I mean, like, besides Peck and Kevin Martin, like, there's literally no vets. I mean, J.J. Barea is no leader, so I don't even count him.
J.J. Barea is not an NBA player.
Yeah, he's really fallen off since he left the Mavericks. He really
Don't
has.
diss the only Puerto Rican player in the NBA, right?
He goes off
Lay
when
off
he's on
him
this
and
team.
Jeremy Lin.
Yeah, I mean,
Leave the Asians and the Puerto Ricans alone.
I'm just not a huge fan of this roster. I think as constructed, they're going to be bad. I mean, Zach LaVine, I'm not sure what he's got. He's athletic, but I mean, who knows what he can be as an NBA player. I do like Glenn Robinson III as a second-round pick, but I don't think he sees the floor. Chase Budinger, he hasn't been able to stay healthy ever. I just think they're probably like a 22, 23 win team, maybe one of the worst teams in the Western Conference, if not the worst.
I think that might be the safest bet on the board, to be honest with you, under 27. Just the guys you named off, I mean, like you said, their lineup, I don't know what it's going to be. And Wiggins, they're talking about making a long two, but the dude doesn't really have a lot of range on his jump shot at this point in his career. So you have a backcourt of Wiggins and Rubio. The spacing is going to be awful on that. So I love Wiggins' potential from a fantasy standpoint because of the steals, maybe a block a game, those kind of things that he can offer. But I just don't see him having a positive impact, winning 5 extra games for a team at this point in his career.
And I agree with you guys. I'm going under. There's really nothing else to say. You guys pretty much hit all of that one. So we're just going to jump right into the next one. We got the Miami Heat at 44.
I'm going under. I think Bosch is going to have a monster year, but D. Wade I just have the finals engraved into my head and just watching him labor out there on the court, not be able to move, and I think he's done.
Yeah, I'm going to take the under, too. And it's just a lot of their role players, too, are aging. I don't even know what Danny Granger even has left, if there is anything left. And so all the shooters that they've lost, I don't feel that they've really recovered anything from those of any of their offseason acquisitions. So I just don't see any way that they could win more than that amount.
Yeah, and I hate to keep agreeing with you guys because I don't like to do that, but this team is just, besides, like you said, Rocky, Bosch. I think Bosch is going to go back to 20-10 efficiency from the both FG and FT, a couple, maybe a block and a half. But, man, I mean, I don't think Luol Deng is going to come even close to what he put up in Chicago. I think he's been a little injury-prone since he left there. Even when he was there, I think Thibodeau, like you said earlier, again, ran him into the ground. And he has so many minutes on his legs. And then, like you said about Dwayne Wade, like, you just, no matter how hard you work, you can't replace knees, And so his knees are just gone, So I don't see him getting to the basket like he has in the past. And so I'm going to take the under.
Yeah, I'm going to go the under, too. I saw Chris Anderson, the Birdman, take a 3 today in the preseason game. That's really the only thing I needed to see. Yeah. And I'm definitely under on this one. Although, the Heat are going to be definitely the 4 or 5 seed in the East still in that range. But, yeah, I just don't, the role players are there, with superstars, and they just don't, they got aging ones there. So I'm going to go under. Nice. Let's jump into the next one. We have the Oklahoma City Thunder, 52.5.
Yeah, that I saw that drop like 5 or 6 games after the Durant injury.
So it's a little lower.
Yeah, I think it opened up at 58 is what I saw on ESPN, and then as soon as the news came in, they dropped it. And I don't know. I'm going to be really curious to see how that one plays out. I'm going to say under because they're in the West, but the other factor to me is they're kind of mumbling that Durant may not be back at 2 months, and they could, ease him back into it or be a little bit longer. And so one of those injuries that could go from 2 months to 3 months, and then it's a really tough to hit that number.
Yeah, I mean, without Durant, it's going to be very tough for them to get 52 wins. So I'm with Rocky. I just don't see any way that they would be able to pull that off. I mean, it's possible that, if Russell, Reggie Jackson, and Ibaka all take on bigger scoring roles, I guess not really Westbrook, but the other two, if they could do that, I guess it's possible they could weather the storm till he gets back. But then, like Rocky brought up, if he does come back, what kind of workload is he going to do? Is he going to have the same workload? Are they just going to run ISO for him? So without knowing that, I would say it's going to be difficult for them to get to 52.
That's a good point. And, I think one thing that people tend to forget, too, is, this is basketball. So, I mean, Kevin Durant comes back 6 to 8 weeks from now, but then it's going to take him a month to find his rhythm. And then I still don't see him going back to what he did last year with 35 points a game because, it's just there's a healthy Russell. And then they have, some up-and-coming players that I think would just take a few shots per game. But I actually like the over on this one because I think Russell's going to have a great year. I think he'll come out. He'll probably be one of the top 3 scorers in the league until Kevin Durant comes back. Ibaka just seems to improve every single year. I like Steven Adams. I think Steven Adams is not only a relevant NBA player, but I think he'll be fantasy relevant this year. Especially if they finally decide to murder Kendrick Perkins and just get rid of him because he is just he's been one of the worst PERs in the league for the last 2 or 3 years. And they actually found a little bit of young help. Who's that 2 guard they have? Andre Roberson.
Oh, okay.
I think he's going to be a nice defender. And I think Reggie Jackson, and he's one of my 6th man of the year candidates, especially when Durant does come back, depending on if he starts, of course, because I know he's been kind of whining about starting. But I'm going to take the over on this one just because I truly believe when those 3 guys do get together, Durant, Russell, and Ibaka, when those guys are healthy and right, those guys win a lot of games.
Yeah, I'm going to go under just because... you talk about the chemistry thing with basketball getting in, filling the flow with everybody. And one thing this team has had a problem with, even with everyone on the floor, is turnovers. And I think you're going to see that come about again. Scotty Brooks isn't exactly an offensive genius. They're kind of pretty predictable. And Russell can be out of control, which is, you take it for all the great things he does. But they're going to be in a lot of close games this year rather than just having a lot of blowouts. So I think it's going to be under, but, Russell's going to do work for sure.
One thing to add, I think, too, is if Mitch McGary is healthy, which I know he just got hurt in the preseason, but I actually like him as a player. He was very highly touted coming out of high school, had a great freshman year at Michigan, then got hurt a little bit, and then kind of got in some trouble, I know. But I actually like him as a sleeper as far as an NBA player, not necessarily fantasy. But I think he might be able to come off the bench, him and Nick Collison, and give him some solid minutes.
To me, it's this is like a prime opportunity to I think Ibaka's going to put up huge numbers the first 2 months. Mm-hmm. He seems to do it whenever Westbrook went down, or, he becomes that solid second option for the team. And so it's kind of one of those sell high moments, I think, this year. If you can get Ibaka at a decent, not have to go too high on him, I think you can end up selling Ibaka later on in the season really high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me and Chris had this exact same combo, actually. And
I had the last pick, and as soon as this happened, I had TK, man. Ibaka's, in the range, and the first thing he said was, sell high, because as soon as Durant gets back, his role changes, and we all love Ibaka. We all love block shots in fantasy, but Ibaka just doesn't do enough as far as his percentages are great, but they're on low amount of attempts, and he's not a high rebounder like you said, Rocky, and he's not a huge scorer when there's a Durant out there.
Right.
And then let's get into the next one. We have the New York Knicks at 40.5. Big Chief Triangle, running it over in New York. He's got his boy Derek Fisher. They should be running our Lakers right now, but Jim Buss is running them to the ground. So they jump ship. They're over in New York, 40.5.
Oh. I don't think I've said over on any of these. But
Utah.
Yeah, Utah. We got Utah over.
Cleveland, too.
I like Rory said, I think the East is better. Not significantly better. And there's going to be less teams tanking than there was last year. And what moves did the Knicks really made other than from a coaching standpoint? They got Calderon now.
Yeah, they did that Calderon Dallenberg for Tyson Chandler trade.
Yeah, and so I don't see what kind of positive impact that's going to make on the team, really, to be honest with you. And so I'm going under. I think the Knicks are just garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely obviously agree with that too on the under. Yeah, for the same reason too. They just didn't bring any talent in. You know, I know.
Got older.
Not trading Tyson Chandler obviously isn't a huge deal at this point, especially in the triangle, but you know, they only really added like Jason Smith's like the only name I can think of that they've even added. So they just clearly haven't got any better. And so I just don't see any way they get to 40.
Gosh, guys, I totally agree with you on this one. I think I take the under. Bargnani is a piece of garbage. Dallenberg is going to be, in and out of the lineup just because of his mentality. He seems to do that every year, no matter where he goes. He has a few good games and disappears for 10 games. And they just have so many chuckers on this team. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a chucker. I love Melo, but he probably overshoots sometimes. Iman Shumpert likes to chuck because he's always trying to prove himself. And then don't even get me started on J.R. Smith. So, and actually, you know what? You mentioned Jason Smith. I actually really like him as a player. He's one of the most efficient mid-range shooters in the NBA. So I think he'll help. But I just look at this roster. They lose their best defensive player in Tyson Chandler. Even though they got rid of the chubbiest starting point guard in the NBA and Raymond Felton, I still think that, this is a 35-win team at best. And I think Melo will once again, after they lose a bunch of games at the start, they're going to just revert to this, the jacket and give it to Carmelo in the post and just let him go to work. So I don't see a lot of chemistry on this team, so I'm going to take the under.
Yeah, I mean, you guys hit it again with this one. Under, it's a no-brainer. We'll move on to the next one. We got the Dallas Mavericks at 50. They got some new additions with Chandler Parsons, Jameer Nelson, Tyson Chandler we just talked about, and they're set at 50.
50 is a lot of wins, but I like them to hit 50. They got a great coach. They're that veteran team, almost like the Spurs with Dirk, and they just kind of know how to manage the regular season. I don't think they'll go very many over 50, but unless somebody goes down like Dirk, the addition of Parsons is huge for that team. Losing Calderon's not a big deal to me. The addition of Tyson Chandler, where he was, he's worked well with Cuban in the past, and he kind of gives them a guy that plays D and boards, like Rory said, a lot more consistently than Dallenberg ever did. And so to me, Dirk he's got that old man game where 50 is definitely in play for me on that.
I'm going to take the under, and it's going to be just slightly. I mean, that's definitely a good range of where they're going to be. My issue with them, I feel, is the bench. I don't know really who I can rely on off that bench. I know, like we brought up, Raymond Felton's going to start the year suspended. Devin Harris will be coming off their bench. But really outside of that, I really don't know what other production they're going to get off the bench. I know Charlie Villanueva's been balling out of his mind in the preseason. So relying on him at this point, and that kind of speaks volume of your bench. So I just don't. I just think they were going to barely get underneath that. I'm going to get 47.
I'm going to take the over, and I actually think Dallas Mavericks are one of the sleepers to win the NBA championship because this team is just stacked. I look at this team. I think they have good chemistry. They have one of the probably top 3 coaches in the NBA with Popovich, Doc Rivers as the other 2. I'm talking about Rick Carlisle. And I just like this team. Tyson Chandler and I think Dirk are the perfect combination because he covers all of Dirk's weaknesses and Dirk covers all of Tyson's weaknesses where, obviously Tyson can't score outside the paint. But I like this team. And of course you guys know I'm a huge Chandler Parsons fan. He can do it all. He can pass, he can shoot, he can dribble, he can finish, he can rebound. He's added some few pounds over the summer. I know which him and his coach have been bickering about, but it looks like it's all muscle to me. I think the big issue with these guys is in a Western Conference when you go every single game against a top flight point guard. They're going to have issues handling point guards. They're going to have to start putting Monte Ellis on people because Devin Harris doesn't guard anybody. Raymond Felton needs to get out of the NBA. And I think Jameer Nelson is going to have a hard time staying healthy. So, but other than that, though, I love this team. Monte Ellis and Dirk had the most efficient pick-and-roll game last year, which is amazing. And I just like Rocky said, I think Chandler Parsons, people continue to underestimate this guy. I think he's going to be huge for this team.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really close. Definitely not where I'd want my money on. But I like the under here. They just don't really have a bench. Like you said, Jameer should play well there. Raymond Felton's a dump truck now. Devin Harris, has been productive off the bench. You got Aminu, and it's if they suffer any injuries whatsoever, they're going to be in trouble. And the West is so tough. You're going to be in a lot of close games, and you got a closer in Dirk, who's going to finish a lot of games out for you. But it's going to be really close, but like the under just barely on that one. And while we're on the Chandler Parsons topic, we'll segue into a different segment and get into some fantasy comparisons here.
Love it.
We have, who would you rather have, Chandler Parsons or Gordon Hayward? And we'll just go in the same order have we been going.
Awesome.
For me, it's Gordon Hayward for me. He had a poor shooting year last year from the field. He's generally been known to have a pretty smooth stroke, so I think that fixes itself a little bit this year. And he's just an across-the-board guy. To me, again, we talked earlier, he's eligible every year at shooting guard and small forward in the ESPN leagues. So he has a little bit of versatility there. And to me, to be able to slot into either your shooting guard or small forward, a guy that can either dime high or rebound high, just gives you some versatility. So I like him from that standpoint. Probably not as many threes as what you're going to get from Parsons, but I'm just an across-the-board guy, and I like what Hayward offers in that situation.
Yeah, I'm with Hayward, too. I'm definitely for the same reasons, across the board, in terms of liking what he can bring to the table. And then also, too, it's just his role on the team. He's just going to have a bigger role. Not that Chandler Parsons won't, but Gordon Hayward will definitely either be the co-1 option with Derrick Favors or he'll be the first option. So because of that, I tend to go with those players in those situations.
I think sorry to cut you off, the thing that for me with Hayward over Parsons is he seems to be more of a ball handler. Like, at least they're going to run their offense through him at times during a game. So I just think he plays a little bit more of a playmaking role than Parsons, where he spots up a little bit more. So
I think I'm just going to go with Parsons because he has better abs. So let's do that. But no, I actually like Parsons just by a hair. And I mean, you got to pick your poison here. I'm looking at the ESPN rankings. They got Parsons at 45, Hayward at 47. I mean, really, it doesn't really matter. But I think what Rocky mentioned earlier is what gives Hayward the ability to be a little bit more valuable in fantasy is that he has that SGSF, whereas Parsons, he's locked in at the SF. So, and you know how valuable it is when you're trying to max your 10 games a day and you're trying to move things around, and you can move Hayward from SG to SF. But Parsons puts up about half to maybe one more three per game, one less assist per game. Their steals and blocks are a wash. The scoring is pretty much a wash. But if you look at the FG, that's the big ticket for me. Parsons was 48% on a little bit less shots, about 13 shots a game. Hayward, though, shot like 15, 16 times a game at 41%. So that hurts. You're talking about 40% shooter at 15 attempts a game. That really hurts your FG. So that's why I take Parsons, and I think I'm just partial to Parsons too. I just really like him as a player. But I mean, you're just picking your poison here. I don't think you can go wrong going either way. I think they're both great 4th, 5th rounders. So.
Yeah, and I like Hayward just because Tyrone Corbin's not there once again. We haven't seen him play with a good coach yet. I think Hayward's numbers have a lot of room for improvement. His field goal should improve. Like you said, you can move him around at the SGSF, which is huge. His dimes are consistent. He's also gained weight this summer too. So I think you're gonna. And they don't have a Dirk in Utah. They got Favors, they got Canner, and a lot of these young guys. These guys are not developed scorers at all, or have weaknesses on one side of the floor or the next. And I think Hayward's the go-to guy over there. He's going to get all the minutes he can handle, and Parsons is too. So it is close, but I do like Hayward. Just the versatility's there.
Mm-hmm. I think, a couple things for me. The one thing is the Jazz are just the community embraces Hayward. They're trying to make the guy the face of their franchise. Mm-hmm. And so they're investing a lot into him, and I just don't think that's going to change. Like Chris said, he's kind of the man for him, and they hope that he turns into a superstar. The other thing with Parsons that makes me wonder is I think he's going to help the Mavericks win more games. I think he's going to be a better player this year, but he just left a system that was like, I mean, you got threes and layups. That's what you shot. And so is he going to get as many three-ball attempts? Is he going to play in a system that's as friendly as what the Rockets was with the Mavericks?
That's a really good point. Can I take back what I said, guys? I'm going to go with Hayward.
I think Hayward has a good year. I think it's a lot closer than – I mean, I think it's really close, but Parsons, just that moving from the Rockets system, that system is bonkers for fantasy.
It's the number one fantasy system. I mean, it really is. That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. And I'm looking at these rebounds, too. I thought Parsons was higher, but it's a wash, too. So I think I'm just going to just backtrack a little bit and go with Hayward.
The field goal, it's pretty hard to swallow. I had him on almost all my leagues last year, and it really hits you in the stomach sometimes.
Tyrone Corbin, I'm just blaming it on him, man.
Yeah.
But I think it was just him having way too much responsibility. I mean, they basically looked at him to create all the plays and to shoot threes off the dribble, which only a few guys in the NBA can really do that effectively. So.
And that's going to kind of come along. Does Trey Burke develop, or does the new Exum kid step in? Can he run a team to take some of the pressure off of him to make him more efficient? I was high on Burke when he came out. I saw a little bit of Lillard in him, but I was wrong. I just don't think Burke's going to be a great NBA player.
Yeah, who I do like is Alec Burks, though. I think.
I like him.
I think he's going to have a nice year. He's a scoring machine. He's shown that he can pass, make nice passes to the corner three, especially if they can get Hayward in that system. Their new coach Quentin Snyder is pretty inventive with the way he does offense. From his Missouri days, I've seen him do some crazy stuff. I actually like the ability for get the ball in Burke's hands and make plays. I think he can take some of that pressure off Hayward.
All right, well, we hit this one pretty well. We're going to move on to some big guys here. We have Marc Gasol or Andre Drummond. Pretty different big man, in fantasy they give you different things. And they're ranked, they have Gasol at 23 and Drummond at 29, but you see Drummond go pretty early in the second or, towards the back end of the second.
Yeah.
To me, I don't know. If I'm able to draft my team the way I would like and I'm able to get guys in certain spots, I would go Marc Gasol just because, again, he doesn't rebound well enough for me as a center spot, which drives me nuts, but he dimes pretty well. He steals really well. He blocks. Great free throw percentage. And so it's one of those things where he's kind of my style of across-the-board type guy. But Drummond's a beast.
Yeah, he is.
If you get Drummond at a good spot, he's the type of player to me that you can punt your free throw percentage and build around what he offers, because I think he's got the potential to be average 14 boards a game and 20 points at some point in his career.
Yeah, I definitely would take Marc Gasol here and feel pretty reasonable about, in terms of my comfortability of taking him over Andre Drummond. And it really just comes down to me with the free throw percentage. But like Rocky brought up, I guess if you structure your team to punt free throw, then it's totally fine to do it. And it definitely is possible that Stan Van can turn him into a Dwight Howard-esque in terms of the ceiling that it could continue to rise for Drummond. So I just think I just generally would go with the safer guy in this spot, and that's definitely what I would be doing here versus the upside. So I would go with Marc Gasol.
Yeah, it's all how you build your team. I mean, you guys are nailing that on the head. I'm going to go with Drummond, though. I mean, because Drummond averaged almost twice as many rebounds as Marc Gasol does. I mean, you're talking, that's a significant number. What you don't want to forget, too, is Drummond was one of the league leaders in field goal percentage. So while you're kicking FT, you're actually dominating FG. And so, and that's the thing, too, until I think a lot of other teams figure it out, he does have a terrible free throw percentage, but he doesn't go to the line enough. He doesn't go to the line like Dwight Howard does, and so until teams figure out that they're going to hack a Drummond, which it could be very, early this year, I think it's going to be Drummond. He averages more blocks. He averages a little bit more steals. The assists, though, Marc Gasol dominates him. But I think Drummond, too, will average more points this year. And so I think while he scores more points, that FG is going to swing your way even more. And like Rocky said, I think other than Anthony Davis, I think he's the brightest young center in the NBA. I want to throw Cousins in that conversation, too. I think those three guys are going to be the best centers in the NBA for the next 5-7 years. So I'm going to go Drummond.
made this trade last year. I had Drummond, and I traded him for an injured Gasol.
Oh, wow.
And the one thing about Drummond is he'll dominate the glass, and the FG's great, but the free throw does hurt you. But he doesn't go consistently. It's kind of interesting compared to Dwight, because a lot of his buckets pretty much are just transition dunks right now, and then just running the floor, beating his man, and then off pick and rolls, and then Brandon Jennings pretty much just chucks. And then with Marc Gasol, on a Sunday when you're in a category battle with everything, Marc Gasol's the best center to have, because he does hit you all across the board. So I think, when it counts, I think I'd rather have Marc Gasol. But like you guys said, if you're building the team around your blocks and rebounds, Drummond's the man. So, but Gasol, one thing on Sundays when you need a little bit of everything, Gasol does that at the center spot, which is really unique.
When I knew everybody was tanking hard last year, when I was watching games like the last 2 months, and it'd be like a 10-point game with like 3-4 minutes left, and Drummond's on the court in the post, and guys wouldn't foul him. And so I think, as maybe not as much this year, next year, when teams stop the tanking, the rebuilding mode, whatever they're in, I think you're going to see Drummond go to the line a lot more over the next couple of years, unless he fixes the free throw.
Which isn't going to happen. It's bad.
It's pretty bad.
It's bad, but the dude just inhales boards.
He's a monster.
I don't know if I've seen somebody board like the guy. The guy could get 20 rebounds in like 25 minutes.
It's insane. He's just like so athletic too. He's actually kind of not a skinny guy. I mean, he's pretty thick, but he's got so much hops. And then he's so strong too. Like if he hits someone, they're just like bouncing off of him. One thing not to forget too, and I think TK mentioned this, is SVG, Stan Van Gundy.
Yeah.
He absolutely made Dwight Howard's career. Dwight's never been the same guy since SVG left Orlando, and I think he's going to design the same kind of situation for Drummond. But this is another great pick by CH as far as comparisons, because they're such polarizing players. But Drummond's my guy.
All right, let's get into our last one here. We have the battle of the shooting guards. I guess Klay gives you the SGSF now, but we're going to go to DeMar Derozen in Toronto and Klay Thompson.
Man, I will go with Klay just because the 3 points carry a lot of value, and he, other than Steph Curry, I believe, maybe Ryan Anderson the year before, is probably top of the player rater in that category. We talked about field goal percentage before, and I don't think either one is probably real strong, DeMar Derozen or Klay Thompson. I think Klay Thompson's going to have a little bit more confidence this year after the good summer he had with the Olympic team. I just don't... I'm not a big DeMar fan unless he can start hitting some threes or diamond a little bit more. I just think that they both offer about the same, but I'll take Klay's threes.
I'm going to go with DeMar Derozen. I think the weaknesses that Rocky just brought up about DeMar, I actually feel he's going to improve on him just because it seems like he's been improving and expanding his game pretty rapidly throughout from his rookie year till now. So I guess I just feel like he's going to continue to grow and get better. And now I don't think like he's going to raise substantially in assists or threes, but I do think it's going to improve. And I think they both do similar things in terms of really only carrying you in about 3 categories. And so I feel that DeMar Derozen is going to continue to add a little bit more to his game to kind of give you a little bit extra to put you over the top versus Klay Thompson. But it's really close.
Very, very close. They got Klay Thompson at 42, DeRozan at 52, which I think is ridiculous because he averaged 22 points last year, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal, and 0.8 trays. So he almost got to that tray. But one thing not to sleep on with DeRozan is that his FT, and I think he's a top 4, top 5 free throw guy because he gets to the line 8-9 times a game, and he hits a 80% clip. And that's why I really like DeRozan. And I like DeRozan too is because he's always, he's overcome the pundits. Everyone says he's a one category guy, but over his career, like TK said, he's improved. I mean, he did not average 4 assists until last year, whereas you're looking at Klay Thompson, who's only averaging 2. And in fact, I think he had the lowest rate in the NBA assists per possession. And so he's obviously just a shooter. But I also like what he did this year in Team USA. He gained a ton of confidence, and it seems to do that for everyone. I think Fareed's going to have a big year. Cousins is going to have a big year. But I think I like DeRozan just in this factor. Other than the fact that the threes, Klay dominates him, I like his overall game a little bit better. He's got a great mid-range shot. His assists have come up, and his FT is incredible. So I think I would just go DeRozan by a hair.
Yeah, I'm with you. I also like DeRozan, in Toronto. There's really just him and Lowry out there. They're getting all the minutes. The threes would be nice. It's one thing. It's something that he just doesn't do yet. He's at 0.8 right now, and 1.5 would just be amazing. And it doesn't seem like a difference between 0.8 to 1.5, but it's huge. Mm-hmm. And I think Klay's got to be around 3, which just, balls you in that category. So, you can pick your poison there. But, I like DeRozan just, is going to give you a little more points, although I think Klay will score more this year. DeRozan just, they need him to score, a lot. Klay still has Steph Curry over there. And, Lowry's, can give you big points, but not quite the same type of player there. Mm-hmm. And then to close out the podcast today, fellas, we're going to go through some categories, awards at the end of the season. We have Sixth Man of the Year, MVP, Rookie of the Year, and then your first-time All-Star for the year. And we'll just go one category at a time. We'll start with the Sixth Man of the Year.
It's a tough one.
That was tough. Yeah, it always ends up just kind of being whoever catches that hot hand early in the year. We kind of bagged on J.R. Smith earlier in the podcast, but, he's another guy who can catch fire, and it seems like if he catches fire earlier, it kind of carries throughout the year. Jamal Crawford, I don't know who I'm going to go with on that. I think Jamal Crawford, he's given a lot of responsibility with that second unit. He pretty much has free reign to gun. I don't know if a guy like J.R. Smith's going to get that in New York. And so I just like the role that Jamal Crawford gets, so I'll go with him.
Do you think J.R.'s going to start New York this year?
I don't know.
Because I'm looking at their roster. It's like they either start him or Tim Hardaway, and it's like he's a superior player.
I heard they got Shumpert in there, yeah.
Shumpert? Oh, that's true.
Shumpert.
I wouldn't start him out of the 3, but I heard that's what they're thinking of doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. A little bit of defense in the starting lineup. What do you think, TK? Who's your guy?
I wanted to go Ryan Anderson, but I actually going to throw a dart here. I'm going to go with Greg Monroe, and I'm just going to more gamble on the assumption that he's going to bring him off the bench. Mm-hmm. And I feel that between Smith, him, and Drummond, they're all going to play somewhere around 20 to 32 minutes. And so I really feel you're going to get a consistent Greg Monroe this year, and I know it's a contract year. And that's probably why they're going to bring him off the bench, is because you can pretty much tell that he's really not in their long-term plans, which is, remotely understandable because they gave Josh Smith all that money. So I'm going to go with Greg Monroe.
That's a good call. I think this one might be, tough because they've already had their coach saying that he wants to limit all their point guards' minutes, but I'm going to go Isaiah Thomas because he's a stud. He was a 20.7 assist guy last year. I cannot believe the Sacramento Kings gave him up and then decided to sign Darren Collison. And then they have the audacity to say they're really excited about that. I'm really surprised by what they did there. I think it's Isaiah Thomas, because he's shown that he can pretty much stay healthy. Before he was a starter in Sacramento, he's shown that he could be a stud off the bench. And so I like him as the Sixth Man of the Year. I'd say my backup is probably Reggie Jackson if they don't start him, which is not, kind of like what you said with Monroe. We don't really know if he's going to start or not, but I think he was a stud last year, excuse me, when he stepped in for Russell, and I think his confidence has gotten even higher.
And I'm going to go with Ryan Anderson down in New Orleans. He just chucks threes, and I just love that. And
he can rebound too.
And he said he'd play the small forward a little bit. I don't know how much of that they're really going to do over there, but they're going to definitely find a way to get him on the court to shoot. They got all those slashers over there. Can they be a factor? Who knows? They stay healthy and all that stuff, but he finds a way to always carve out minutes and somehow just hit threes at a ridiculous clip.
Mm-hmm. He's one of the purest shooters, especially for a big man the league's ever seen. His stroke is so effortless. It's like he doesn't even jump shoot it. He just kind of set shoots it, and it's like splash.
And then let's get into the next one. We have the MVP race.
Ooh.
Who's your MVP winner?
Kobe! No, I'm just kidding.
Kobe!
I don't know.
Rocky, I feel
don't know.
bad. You have to go first every time.
I know, and the front runner definitely went down. KD went down. That pretty much takes him out of the running. The guy to me that can do it this year, I think LeBron's going to take a step back, like we talked about early, play a little bit more unselfish. Well, he's always been unselfish, but I don't think he's going to put up the numbers that he may have in the past. But I think the guy who's made the biggest leaps in his game each year is Blake Griffin.
Oh, that's a good call.
I could see the Clippers. I could definitely see the Clippers being a top 2 seed in the West. CP3's kind of let the game play through Blake a little bit more last year. I just think Blake's gonna have a monster year this year, so I'll go with Blake Griffin.
I've heard that he's been hitting threes. Is that true?
I don't know. He's a visibly
Yeah.
better player each year. He's always passed the ball well, boarded the ball well, but he's definitely stepped his game up, and I just see a monster year. And we all know how winning affects the MVP balloting, and I just see him winning a lot of games again, and him having a monster year to go with that. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a good pick. I wanted to go James Harden, but like you brought up, it's generally going to be someone who's within the top 2 or 3 seeds in their conference, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually feel Golden State's going to have a say in terms of being up there in the top 3 this year. I just have a feeling about them, and so I'm going to go Steph Curry for his obvious reasons, in terms of what he does for that team. So I'm going to go Steph Curry.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, guys, I think this is a 3-horse race, and I think my third one might surprise you, but I think it's Blake for obvious reasons that you guys just mentioned. Steph, if he can stay healthy, which I'm still not sold on his long-term health. And then I think Russell is going to come out and just absolutely ball. And if he can carry this team while their superstar is out, I don't think he'll end up winning it at the end of the year, but I think that first 2-3 months he'll be in that kind of conversation is like, wow, Russell's really doing his thing. So I think that's the 3-horse race, but toward the end of the year, I think it's going to come down to Blake and Steph, and I still think LeBron's going to be in the conversation because they're going to dominate the Eastern Conference. Right. And so I'm going to go with Blake Griffin, though. I was, stunned how he fixed his FT woes. His range has gotten even farther. He's averaging like 3 or 4 assists from the PF position, which is crazy. I think if he can block a few more shots, get a few more steals, show a little more strength on the defensive end, I think he's going to be the dude.
Nice. I'm going to go with LBJ. I know he's got his sidekicks over there, but everybody just loves LBJ, and when it comes down to it, they're going to have the best record in the East, or it's going to be close. Chicago's going to have a say with that. But, if they find a way to get that 1 seed and just look great towards the end of the year, everyone's going to be talking about how great and unselfish LeBron is, and that's true. And I think he's going to hold up that trophy in Cleveland, and everyone's going to lose their mind over there.
I think, the only thing that obviously, it's not even close right now that he's the best player in the game, in my opinion. I just think it's kind of the voter fatigue thing. Shaq could have won MVP how many years in a row? People just want something new. And so I think it's going to be a new name this year. Another name that kind of comes to my mind, again, I think MVP every year seems to be a kind of thing where, like you said, if Westbrook were to carry a team that isn't supposed to be top 2 or 3 now with Durant coming, I think if Washington were to take a big leap, I think John Wall could throw his name in there, and I think he's going to play. I think he's just getting better each year. I think he's going to take another big jump, and he got snubbed from the USA team this year, and so I just see him being a guy, fantasy and in real life, that just puts up a monster year.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys think an outside shot for LaMarcus Aldridge has a chance? If the Blazers ball out, like a top 4 seed in the West?
I don't. Just only reason why is because he's put up, if you look at his numbers over the last 2-3 years, he's put some monster numbers
Huge
up.
Numbers.
And I don't know if they're going to get any better than that.
Yeah. And
I don't think the team's going to get any better than what they are. And so that would be my only argument against that. But, if he got to, upper 50s in wins with these numbers, his name would definitely have to be there.
Mm-hmm.
If you see LaMarcus out there hitting some tray balls maybe, and they just become this dynamic team, hey, how can you not? LaMarcus fills it up. I don't know if that's a good thing for him to be out there shooting threes, but if they find a way to have that work for him and he balls, why not?
What about Rodney Stuckey and Indiana Pacers? I mean, if he carries the Pacers to a playoff
If the
seed,
Pacers make the playoffs, I mean, that'd be huge. Let's get into the next one. Rookie of the Year.
Ooh, I'm gonna go Jabari, just because it's probably he's gonna put up numbers. The kid can game. He's got game, and his offensive numbers are gonna be really, really solid for a rookie. He doesn't play much D, but that's not gonna hurt his Rookie of the Year case. It's kind of the opposite of what we talked MVP. You could go 12 and 60, and or 70 and still be in the running for Rookie of the Year. And so it's all about numbers with those guys, and I think that Jabari is going to put up great numbers. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on Rocky with this one as well. I just don't see any way that it's not Jabari. I can't even really think of someone that's going to kind of come out of the water and maybe potentially even challenge him for it. I think it's more of the role that any of these rookies could potentially play, I think, is really why I don't see anyone really challenging Jabari. So I'm going to go Jabari.
I think it's a two-horse race. I don't think we should forget about Elfrid Payton as the second guy.
Yeah.
He's a baller. I've watched him a few times. I didn't know much about him in college, but as soon as I saw him play in the NBA, he just transitioned so easily. Kind of reminded me of Lillard, not the shooter obviously, but just the way he carried himself and his game spoke for itself. It just transitioned. I think Payton and Jabari are going to really fight this thing out. Especially if he takes the reins of that point guard position in Orlando and makes them semi-respectable. But like you said, Rock, it doesn't matter how many games you win. MCW won it last year on the worst team in the NBA, or second worst team. I think the Bucks were the worst. But I think Jabari takes this down, dude. Everyone knows Jabari's a baller. I can't believe he didn't get taken number 1 overall. And so it's Jabari Parker, the stud.
Yeah, Milwaukee needs all the help they can get over there. They got this weird roster, but Jabari's going to be the one finding his way on the court the most over there. Nerlens Noel, even since he sat out all last year, will be in the mix. I think he could be a guy if he can stay on the court. At least throws himself in the hat. But Jabari's the man. So yeah, it's definitely Jabari there. And let's get into the next one, which is our first-time All-Star.
Oh man!
Finally breaking through. It's hard to make the All-Star team in the NBA. You can ball,
Lowry
but it doesn't.
Year?
No, they put DeRozan on, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's Lowry then for me. The dude got paid. I don't think that's going to affect his performance. Some kind of give up after that contract year. I think you just look from a fantasy standpoint, it's really hard to ignore the numbers he puts up. If he can get Toronto just in playoff contention, period, by the All-Star break, they've got Rondo's out for the first part of the year, and I know it's the fan voting and all that stuff, but he's not. I don't think Rondo's going to get voted in. So from a guard standpoint, I don't know who's ahead of him. D-Rose
Wall
is going to get a lot of votes. Wall,
Kyrie.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The point. Maybe I'm wrong on that. The point.
Jose Calderon.
Yeah, Jose Calderon. The point guard position's
Stevenson.
tough, but I think that Lowry's, I don't know. His numbers are just great.
They
and
are.
Sooner or later, somebody's got to take notice on that.
I'm going to go with Lance Stevenson. I really feel he's going to take on a pretty decent role here with the Bobcats. Or I guess it's the Hornets now, whatever they are. But anyways, I feel he's going to score a little bit more than he even did with the Pacers. I think they're going to do a lot of sets where he's going to be running the offense. Maybe he might be the player they'll keep in, throughout the first quarter, early into the second, and that will be the point where Kemba Walker rests. And I know they did that with him in Indiana. So I really feel he's going to take on a pretty big role this year. So I'm pretty high on Lance Stevenson.
That's a good call. I'm going to have a tough time even picking one guy, so I'm going to break this down by conference. First in the Western Conference, I'm going to go with my man Boogie Cousins, because Boogie Cousins' numbers are insane, and people are starting to take notice. I think he deserved it last year, and the only reason he didn't make it is because the Western Conference is stacked. And of course, the fans get to vote the starting lineup, and so there's always one or two guys in there that don't deserve to be there. But I'm going to go with Boogie Cousins in the West. I think he's going to put up like 25 points a game, 12 rebounds, a couple steals, a couple blocks, and he'll keep the Kings. They're not going to make the playoffs, but he'll keep them semi-respectable. In the Eastern Conference, I am going to go with Kyle Lowry. because Kyle Lowry deserved it last year. Even though DeRozan scored more, I think Lowry is the leader of that team emotionally, as well as, he's the point guard of that team. He runs the show. And so I think those are your two guys this year.
I'm going to pick something a little different here. I'm going to go with our big fella, Andre Drummond.
Ooh.
The guy, if Stan Van can just, duplicate what he did with Dwight, I mean, there's no reason for him not to just dominate and be the best center in the East. I know you got Joakim over there, who is one of the best centers in the game, but, Drummond's on the rise, and if they can just stay healthy, and he can, just has a way of just putting up enormous numbers. Mm-hmm. And if he can get Detroit into a respectable record, I think that they end up rewarding a guy like him.
Was Wall an All-Star last year?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
okay,
he was.
Okay, let's say he'd be in there too. That's a good call. See, I didn't even think about Drummond, because Drummond is, you're right, I mean, he's the best center in the East, especially if Joakim Noah gets hurt, which he's done pretty much every year. I don't think you see him replicating his numbers with D-Rose in the lineup, and they're a lot deeper too with Pau Gasol in there and the rookies they got.
Right.
So, Drummond, that's a great pick. I didn't even think about that.
All right, guys, that's all I have for the day. Is there anything you guys want to end with before we shut this down?
I'm good.
No, man, I think we covered pretty much a lot of the base.
I'm looking forward to this season. I think this season's going to be amazing. One of the most exciting seasons we've had in a long time. Last year was great too, but I think we're going to see, like I said kind of at the start of the podcast, we're going to see a lot of young guys that people don't know who they are going to come into the fray and replace a lot of those old names that people expect to do good. So I'm really looking forward to all these surprises that are going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest thing for me too is daily fantasy. I need to get you guys all on it.
Mm-hmm. I'll be on it.
Yeah.
We'll all be on it.
We all got to get on it this year. It's a blast. It's a blast.
Word.
Going to be on DraftKings?
DraftKings, that's where I'm at now. Draft Street actually got bought out by DraftKings. So
that's right.
And, that's something in our next podcast we can tackle, the daily leagues. It's something that's really popular now. And, Rocky's had great success at it. And it's something we all need to dabble in. And we'll get into some, how to set your lineups, into some different stuff like that in the next couple of weeks on our next podcast.
Well.
And that was a great first podcast for the Pass and Screen Away for Pop the Trunk Sports. And thanks for everybody, and we'll catch you next week.
Peace.